ladies and gentlemen, we got a hot one for you tonight. This is episode 8 of Nervous Breakdowns with G, the podcast where I answer your questions about mental health, dating, personality, you name it. I break it down for you guys. It's in the title. My name is Gino. I'm a counselor. I'm a nationally certified counselor. I have some master's degrees in psychology and some other stuff. And I have more than 10 years of experience in the field. And today the topic is road rage. Man, I'm excited about this one because I've taken to kind of posting on my Facebook and announcing the shows that are coming up just because I'm interested to know what people are thinking about it. And I got a ton of responses to this one, guys. I got some stories, people getting chased through town, after a road rage incident, people in parking lots banging on other people's windows and screaming and cursing at them. I do have to say, and maybe again, it's fair. It's maybe some people are embarrassed, but no one ever owned up to being the road rager. Like no one's ever thrown a brick at somebody, or at least in that in my Facebook responses. And I got some private messages too, which were kind of eye-opening to say the least. People that wanted to tell me their story without necessarily being public about it. But it seems like road rage is something that we've all experienced. I mean, we all drive and all have arguments and disagreements with other drivers on the road. So this is something I'm happy to tackle, especially because it kind of jives with a specialty of mine in counseling, which is anger management. And there's so many parallels here. But I think that in order to have a real discussion about this, we need to talk a little bit about evolution and the role that it plays in our reactions to things. So I talked about this a little bit in my anxiety show, the show that I talk about how to relax, and I think it was episode 4 or 5. I don't remember, but check it out, guys. There's a lot of good info in that one. But we are products of our environment. I don't mean our parental environment, although that is true to a degree, but I'm really talking about our evolutionary environment. And what I mean by that is that human beings have existed for hundreds of thousands of years. Only a tiny fraction of that has included civilization, right? Or laws or people living in communities where it's been pretty safe. In fact, even during civilization, there's been a lot of really dangerous times. We live now, in this modern day, we are the least likely of any human ever to be murdered, okay? The chances are for a modern human in the United States that you're going to die of natural causes or by car accident, frankly, but not necessarily by murder. This wasn't always the case. I mean, there were times when nations were at war and you could be living your life and then Mongol raiders would come through and pillage your town and kill half the people and roll out. Or even just wild animals were more of a threat years and years ago. And so because of that, our natural problem solving is pretty straightforward, right? There weren't many problems a primitive man couldn't fix by running away from them or by fighting them, all right? Either I'm going to smash this thing or I'm going to head for the hills. But at the end of the day, there wasn't many problems that didn't fit into one of those two categories. And so many of the issues that we experience as modern humans, we experience because we're having an argument between the more modern part of us and the more modern requirements of society and the more primitive parts of us that are saying, no, we're going to handle this the way we've handled it for millions of years and function be damned, right? I mean, if you run away from something in the modern, like if you have bills to pay and it's making you anxious, you can't so much run away. But at the same time, we have that fight or flight response sometimes when we have panic attacks. So I want to talk a little bit about brain function in that respect, where play along with me for a second. So take your hand and put it on your forehead, right? Now, the part of your brain that your hand is covering is the most modern part. The forebrain is a part that we have as human beings that not many other animals have. Chimps have it to a degree, but although it's not as developed as ours. And I haven't done a lot of research on dolphins, but I understand that they have a really well-developed, certain parts of their brain are really kind of impressive. But that part that's under your hand right now is the human part of you. And what that means is inside there are the functions that human beings have that other animals don't. We're talking language. We're talking resource management, right? Human beings have the ability to delay gratification, ideally, or to think ahead and plan ahead and ration resources, right? Like if I have, I bring my lunch with me in the morning to work, my dog would sit and eat that whole thing, right? First thing in the morning. He doesn't really understand that lunch has to last him all day. I'm not ashamed to say I've eaten my lunch before lunchtime, sure. but I knew it was wrong as I was doing it. But frankly, like, human beings have the ability to say, okay, I'm going to save this for later because I'll be hungry later. My dog doesn't know he's going to be hungry later because he can't think forward. He doesn't have time in his brain. So that part is under the hand that you have on your forehead right now. Now, take the same hand and move it back to the back of your head, kind of at the base of your skull or the top of your neck, and that's your brainstem, all right? Your brainstem is the part that controls life support, basically respiration. It controls heart rate. It controls, your blood pressure. Essentially, what keeps you alive, okay? And there's no thought that goes on back there. That's completely automatic, autonomous. Now, somewhere in the middle there, that's where the caveman version of you lives, the chimp, all right? And I'm going to geek out for a second. Those of you who are comic book nerds will know exactly what I'm talking about, but I think there's a part of this analogy that I'm going to be using throughout this podcast today that I need to explain for the less well-versed in nerdery, okay? The Incredible Hulk is a really cool comic book character. If you have not seen the Incredible Hulk movies, now pay attention. Skip the first one. Skip the one where the star is Eric Bana. Just don't watch it, okay? Instead, watch the one that has Ed Norton in it, or you can get a pretty good sense for the Hulk in the Avengers movie. The first one with Eric Bana, I don't know. I have mixed feelings about it. But it explains his origin and where he comes from, so you get to see where the Hulk is about, what he's about. But it's just not a good Hulk movie, okay? But the central point that I'm trying to make is that the Hulk is about a scientist, Dr. Banner, who experiments with a certain kind of radiation, gamma radiation, right? And what he's looking for is the beneficial properties of this radiation, that it might be able to cure cancer or make somebody feel stronger or whatever. But at any rate, there's an accident in the experiment, and he unlocks a superpower, essentially. But his superpower is a mixed blessing. What it is that if he becomes angry to a certain point, he goes into like rage mode. He grows to the point where he rips all of his clothes except his pants, and turns green and just becomes super strong, doesn't think very well, and smashes things. Further, the more people try to fight with him when he's in this mode, the more indestructible he gets. So what inevitably happens is that he starts to, create wreck. He's kicking a whole bunch of ass, smashing things, and then the military gets involved, and they're shooting at him, and bullets are bouncing off him, but they're just making him more mad. And it snowballs. It turns into a massive, snowball effect. I don't know to use the word again, but it gets ugly. Let's put it that way. This has more than a superficial. What's the word I'm looking for? I can't think right now. More than a superficial correlation to what happens in our brains, okay? Somewhere in the middle of that smart, cool human part of our brain in the front and the kind of robotic life support brain that we have in the back is our Hulk brain. It's our primitive, chimp fight or flight brain that we have. And when that guy gets activated, we become very similar to the Hulk. We stop thinking about consequences. We stop making good choices. We start to do things that are impulsive, and we start to hurt others and act in a way that we might not normally. So I want you to try to remember a time when you've done that, because this part of us exists for everyone, right? This isn't something that's pathological where if you have Hulk brain, there's something wrong with you. No, this is everyone. Everyone has it, right? I can think of several instances in my own life where, especially, if I'm arguing with my wife, the Hulk brain takes over, and I might say something that normally I would know would get me into some deep shit, or that would make my wife feel bad, right? But you've done it with your spouse, guys and girls. You've done it definitely with your partner, where when you're in the middle of an argument, that thing that you've been holding on to comes out. And, the consequences are pretty bad, right? I mean, it escalates the argument. Sometimes you hurt their feelings and it becomes an issue down the road, right? Well, what happened? What happened? Why is it that when you got mad, that thing came, shooting out of your mouth? But what happened is Hulk brain took over. You weren't thinking about the consequences. You were just Hulk smash, right? You just wanted to hurt the person that you were angry at. Sometimes it goes further than words. Sometimes we get so angry that we break things. Certainly, I know that I've thrown things. I've gotten frustrated when I've been working on a car and thrown the wrench, or gotten mad and spiked something on the ground. Sometimes something that I really wanted, right? Like I've seen people throw their cell phone, and now you have to replace it. So what's the consequence? Why didn't you consider the consequence before you threw it? You didn't consider it because you were in Hulk mode. All right. Now, here's the important thing. Just like the Incredible Hulk and Dr. Banner, he often practices. Just to get back into the comic book for a second, the scientist doesn't like the Hulk. He hates that he loses control, and the whole kind of the underlying point of the comic book is it deals with this inner conflict that he has, where he doesn't want to become the Hulk. He wants to learn how to manage it. And in the Ed Norton movie, he learns how to meditate and control it in that way. Well, just like in that movie, when he turns into the Hulk, it's too late. When you turn into Hulk brain, there's no more anger management that happens. Anger management happens if you turn into the Hulk. Well, actually, let me back up for a second. So I like to, with my anger management clients, introduce them to an anger scale. And what we do in the anger scale is we start to rate our anger, because a big part of getting angry is sometimes we're not aware when we're escalating. We are reacting and not being that self-aware, and we're getting angry and we don't even know about it. So a big part of anger management is starting to become more aware of where we're at on the anger scale. So we go from 0 to 10, where 0 is no anger at all, and 10 is like, red hot rage. And I call anything past an 8 the point of no return. And the first thing I tell my clients is this: I don't have anger management that works 8, 9, and 10. It doesn't exist. And the reason it doesn't exist is, just like the Incredible Hulk, you can't fight fire with fire. The Incredible Hulk has to burn himself out, and he has to go somewhere to chill out, and only by being calm can he become the scientist version of himself. In the same way, for our Hulk brain, once we hit 8, 9, 10, there's just anger management is too late. You should have done it at 4 and 5. Okay, so by now you're asking yourself, all right, G, this is real cool stuff, and you're teaching us about the Hulk brain. We got more into comic books than I might have wanted to, but what does this have to do with road rage? Well, I'm glad you asked. So, there's a lot of evidence to suggest that when you're driving, the part of your brain that's the smart part in the front under your forehead is actually not in control. And I can demonstrate that for you. How many times have you driven home from work and been engaged in a phone call, listening to something on the radio, maybe having an audiobook? I know none of my listeners text and drive, but I'm sure I see it happening that, sometimes people are texting and driving. And you get home and you realize that you didn't even pay attention to how you drove home. At no point did you consciously choose what roads you were going to go on, or think about the mechanics of driving in terms of kind of turning the wheel and pressing the gas and shifting if you have a manual. You drove home on autopilot, basically. And there's a lot of evidence to suggest that that's going on in the Hulk part of your brain, the more reptilian part of your brain. Now, I've heard there's not a real clear answer why, but one of the suggestions is that because we are not really designed to drive a vehicle fast, the primitive human might have moved at 15 or 20 miles an hour at a top sprint, and just for a few seconds. Because we have to start to react to things at a 60 or 70 mile an hour pace, a very primitive reptilian part of our brain, it's just like a reflex mode, takes over. And that's why it doesn't take a lot of conscious effort. But it also has the effect of kind of artificially putting you up on the scale. It puts you up on the anger scale because you're activating the more Hulk part of your brain, even though the act of driving isn't something that makes you angry. It's just kind of by necessity we're engaged in a more the more primitive part of our brain is engaged. So the reason I brought up Hulk brain is because when we're driving and we're artificially at this like 5 to 6 level, it doesn't take much to throw you into rage mode, right? Even if you're not that angry. And how often does it happen to you? My own personal experience is sometimes I'll be driving along and not paying attention or just kind of listening to the radio, and I'll realize all of a sudden that the person in front of me has just been, riding their brakes. I just smacked the mic. Has just been riding their brakes, and all of a sudden I'm like, well, what the F are you doing? I'm cursing at them out of nowhere, right? Out of something that I wasn't even aware of about 3 seconds ago. I was kind of only subconsciously aware of. I don't know if you guys have similar experience, but that's mine. And the only way I can explain that is that I'm already kind of aroused. Like I'm already kind of in an agitated state just by virtue of driving. So we have a real risk factor as we're driving if these things are true, if our brain state is such that it makes us more likely to enrage. Another piece of road rage that I think goes overlooked a lot is the fact that when we're initially getting angry at another driver, we're almost more getting angry at their car than at them, right? Like if you're driving along and somebody cuts you off, you don't even know what that person looks like. You're just reacting to that big thing moving in front of you. So it has the effect of dehumanizing them, right? We're angry at a thing, not a person. So we can allow ourselves to become more angry and throw us into this Hulk mode, so that by the point where actually confronted with a person's face who might be either an old lady or a big strapping manly man, by that point, the fact that we're in Hulk mode it makes it not matter, right? Like I've heard stories about people jumping out of their car and they go smash pound on the window of the other person's car, and it's an old lady and it's a big man intimidating them. I know my mom has told me that she's gotten yelled at by a couple of people. Well, she's an old lady, she doesn't drive that well, but or the opposite happens where a woman will jump out of the car and just rage at a guy, who can clearly hurt them if they intended. So the road rage piece kind of just more and more demonstrates how irrational it is, how it's very Hulk-like, very beastly, where we're acting out against people that we don't even really know, that they really haven't. Our reaction is way out of proportion to the thing that's actually bothering us. Okay, now that we have thoroughly explored, well, not that thoroughly, but thoroughly enough for the purposes of this podcast, now that we've thoroughly explored the neurological and evolutionary brain functions that lead us to have road rage, I want to talk about a cognitive function. Right. Now, the type of therapy that I practice is cognitive therapy. I'm not special. Most people practice a form of cognitive therapy. But for those of you who don't understand what cognitive therapy is, the root of it is that we constantly tell ourselves things about the world. And you guys have heard me talk about this in other podcasts, about the automatic thoughts that we have. But one of the things that we can do to ourselves, well, let me rephrase that. Cognitive therapists believe that a lot of our distress comes when we tell ourselves things about the world that don't match reality. When I was talking to my Facebook friends about this podcast and road rage in general, the theme seemed to be that people who are driving that piss them off are people that drive in a non-courteous or disrespectful way. People who don't use their signals, that don't consider other drivers on the road, that cut other people off, or that seem to be driving distracted. And it seemed to me that many of my friends were telling themselves that people should drive in a courteous way, or that people do drive in a courteous way, except for some people. And I have to think to myself, how much does this actually match reality? Because if you really pay attention, I commute a long way to work every day, and I often have an opportunity I'm not thankful for, but an opportunity nonetheless, of sitting in traffic and being able to observe other people on the road. Now, mind you, I'm not saying that I'm a perfect driver and I always have both hands on the wheel. No. I drive just like everybody else drives. Sometimes I'm distracted and sometimes I'm attentive, okay? But when I look around at people in traffic, the majority of them have some distractions going on, right? Who's fiddling with his radio, who's putting on makeup, who's stuffing his face. I mean, geez, I've seen people reading like newspapers. I mean, I don't mean it's like folded up. We're talking about the full 2-page spread where I don't even know how they can see to drive, much less, pay attention. And just on that observation, the thing I can tell myself that's the most in line with reality is that most people are driving pretty fucked up. All right. Most people are driving they're oblivious to what's going on the road. So consider the different attitudes between somebody that says people that are driving should be courteous and attentive versus somebody who gets behind the wheel and says, hey, most of these guys driving out here are driving dangerously. Okay. I guarantee you that the person who has the thought that's more in line with reality, the thought that people are driving in a way that's dangerous, will be able to cope with people getting cut off, with people not using their blinkers better than the person who's telling themselves how people should behave. If I have the thought that people are driving with distractions and somebody cuts me off, I'm going to be like, there it is. Or I may drive differently. I may give more room for people to get in front of me. Or I may check my mirrors more often and see when people are acting crazy or driving aggressively. I may be more prepared and I may be more engaged in the act of driving, which actually takes my brain out of Hulk mode, right? If I'm more actively engaged in driving, that's the more conscious frontal part of my brain as opposed to the more Hulk automatic part of my brain. And what about times you've been driving? Have the times that you've lost control of your temper been the times when you've been very attentively driving? Or have there been the times when you haven't been paying attention and then all of a sudden somebody cuts you off? I'm willing to bet it's the second scenario. And I'm willing to bet that because that's been my experience. The times when I've been, stuck in traffic and really having to pay attention to what's going on and people are driving crazy, the times when I've been a more cautious driver have been the times when I've been less likely to get angry. The times when I've been taken by surprise by somebody have been the times when I've gotten the most pissed off. Now, throughout this all of the things I've discussed can apply to basically any anger, right? Anytime you get angry, whether it's with a spouse or road rage or driving. But I have to say there's a special kind of road rage if you're actually getting out of cars and confronting people. And if that's the case, if you're getting out of cars and throwing things at people, you may have like a psychiatric condition called like intermittent explosive disorder, where you get angry and you just kind of act out. I think most of us, even when we're angry, have some kind of restraint. Like in my angriest day, I don't smash my wife. I don't hit her. I don't put my hands on her. In fact, I barely curse at her. But some people with not too much provocation will get pretty violent. And if that's what's going on with you, you should definitely go see a psychiatrist. And I give the same website I give all the time, which is samhsa.gov. SAMHSA.gov. Let me just say it out. It's Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration.gov. It's a great website. You go on it. There's a ton of information on there. You find a provider or call your insurance company or just Google community mental health in your neighborhood. So, because if you're getting into repeated, like violent confrontations with somebody, you may have actually like a physiological, neurological difference in your brain that lowers your ability to control yourself. I read some paper that people who routinely get into fistfights have enzymes in their blood that indicate inflammation in the brain. And so just the brain is different. And if your brain's not functioning right, you're not going to function right. Right? But I'm talking about more of the kind of snap anger, snap rage that we get where you're not necessarily out there duking it out with somebody in a parking lot. Okay. So if I could bring it back, when we're driving, we have a lot working against us in terms of anger management. And the primary one is that it seems that a part of our brain that is more primitive is in charge when we're driving, which may lead us to react more strongly to things and to react in a more primitive way. So we're not going to talk it out. We're going to either flip out or run away, okay? Fight or flight, once again. And the best way to combat this, if you have trouble with this, is to accept it. You're going to accept that you have this tendency to get angry, and you're going to sit in the car and you're going to try to have, before you depart, before you turn that key and drive out, you're going to try to have a realistic expectation of what's about to happen to you. You're going to sit in your car and you're going to tell yourself, look, I have trouble managing my anger. There's a lot working against me as far as my evolution is concerned. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to get out here. I'm going to be attentive on the road. I'm going to leave a lot of space between myself and the people in front of me because I know other people drive like assholes. It would be nice if people drove courteously, but the truth of the matter is people are driving with all kinds of shit going on in their car, and they're going to cut me off if they get a chance. And they're not going to cut me off because they don't like me or because they're disrespectful of me. They're going to cut me off because they don't even see me. Or they're so wrapped up in what they're doing, they're not going to let me merge in, and they're not going to be courteous about it. If you sit down and before you start driving, you tell yourself some of these reality-based things, you're going to find that your whole attitude is going to be different. You're going to be able to take stress better. You're going to have your eyes open when you're on the road. You're going to be a better driver. And you're going to be able to resist freaking out more. But if you find yourself in a confrontation with somebody, by all means, don't engage them, right? Once they're in Hulk mode, they are just the fighting fire with fire is only going to make it worse. There was an interesting response that I got on my Facebook, which is one woman I know from high school said that she was being confronted by another woman who was banging on her window, and she made kissy faces at the woman, and the woman kind of backed off. And I think because that response was so perplexing, it kind of shook her out of her Hulk mode. She didn't fight fire with fire. She fought with like a paradoxical response, with kind of a loving response, although I suspect there was a pretty sarcastic kissy. But again, these situations where somebody is road raging and to where they actually get out of the car and they're confronting you are dangerous. People get hurt all the time, and so if it happens to you, don't get out of your car. Call the cops. Be safe, guys. There's not a lot you can do. Anger management doesn't happen in Hulk mode. Again, anger management happens when you sit down in the car and before you start driving. So this has been a fun podcast for me. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I am really interested in having people listen to this thing. So if you like this podcast and you want to help me out, share it. Tell your friends about it. Whenever I see my download numbers go up, it kind of gives me a little thrill. And please follow me on Twitter. Join the conversation. Give me some feedback. I want to have these anecdotes that I can talk about in my podcast. So my Twitter account is Breakdowns with G, at Breakdowns with G. I have my Tumblr page, breakdownswithg.tumblr.com, and you can email me at breakdownswithg@gmail.com. And once again, I'm on iTunes. I'm on Stitcher Radio. Stitcher is a great app, by the way. If you don't know what that is, I mention it in every podcast, but I realize some of you might not know what it is. It's a free app. If you have a Android phone, you can go to the Google Play Store, download Stitcher, and if you like podcasts, they're all on there. The majority of them are on there. You can just stream it right to your phone. You don't have to download anything. I listen to all my favorites on there. I listen to Joe Rogan and Adam Carolla, Dan Carlin. Great podcasts and free. It's free. Just sign up and it's great. And, your truly favorite podcast, Nervous Breakdowns with G. So thank you very much, guys. Thanks for joining, and see you next time.